Hello, I'd just like to thank OYA for joining us. If you could just introduce yourself and then maybe to give us a little bit about what OBAC is.
Sure. So my name is Ngardy Conteh George. I am one of the co-founders, along with Allison Duke and Otisha Massaquoi, of OYA Black Arts Coalition, otherwise known as OBAC. We are a non-for-profit charitable organization based in Toronto, Canada. And we support Black creatives, Black filmmakers, digital content creators who work in the screen-based industry in Canada.
Okay, that's great. In fact, when I was just looking at the beginning, the very first thing I was thinking, I was wondering about how much support you could offer new media types. It's good to see that you sort of directly address that right at the beginning, because I feel that new media has offered a lot to creators of color who perhaps weren't being seen or couldn't get access to the sort of normal routes, whether it be especially in terms of even things like presenting, things that are not just perhaps if they wanted to be an actor. So I think that's interesting, right?
Mhm.
I guess what what do you think provided that spur 5 years ago that made you go from this should be a good idea to right, this is going to be it. We're going to push this with a passion, and we're going to make it into reality.
Yeah, so actually, we started out, Allison and myself, forming OYA Media Group, which is our production company, our for-profit production company. And at the time of forming OYA Media Group, which came out of, we both had our own separate production companies, and we decided to join forces and merge to, kind of be able to work on bigger projects. We figured, you're stronger together. We both had been working independently, for a couple decades, and thought that we were ready to kind of, grow. And so we thought the growth together would be the best step. And so when we were creating OYA Media Group, we thought that it would be a really strong for us to bring the next generation along with us. We both had mentored people over the years, always bringing in young people on our projects in a more informal way. And we thought, well, why don't we formalize this? And at the same time, Allison was also teaching at different universities, and was kind of headed in that direction as well. And so we came up with the OYA Emerging Filmmakers Program. And we received support from our provincial government to actually have this formal program of training emerging filmmakers, giving them networking, skills development, soft skills training, and practical experience within our industry at that time. So that was back in 2018. There was a report that came out looking at anti-Black racism in Canada, specifically, and just talking about statistics that Black youth and Indigenous youth have the highest rates of school dropouts, of unemployment. And so there were some actions needed to kind of correct these imbalances. And one of them was to have initiatives that were company-led industry initiatives. And so our initiative was for the film industry to kind of help course correct in the film industry. As you know, which I'm sure it's not just in Canada, but there, when it comes to union representation, people working in the film industry, there's a lot of disparities there, and you don't really see people who look like me, working in various positions in this industry. And so we thought this program would be a way of bridging the gap for many people who finished university and they need some better footing to find their way to work in the industry. Our industry is a very relationship-based industry. It's who you know. Quite often, and a lot of people who come from Black communities across Canada historically don't have that who you know legacy don't have that network. And so we thought this program would help bridge that gap to create those networks, make those introductions, show people how to work in this industry. We also found that a lot of people who come from film school, you learn the technical, you learn the creative in film school, but you don't always learn the business aspect, how the industry works, how to move around the industry. And those things you kind of learn through doing, through experience. And so those are the kind of aspects we kind of wanted to bring to young people in this industry. And so that's how the program started. It was just, our organization started with one program, one cohort. We call them our firstborns. Now we're just entered our 6th year of that program. We have six other programs now. And so after about 3 years of running our emerging filmmakers program, we thought that there are other aspects to our industry. It wasn't just emerging filmmakers that need support. Black filmmakers at every stage in their careers need support. Due to the historical inequities that are in our industry. And so we started dreaming up and thinking about what other programs could we do, what other ways could we support. And so then we thought, well, maybe we should also formalize this within a structure. And that structure was our non-for-profit charitable organization that we called OYA Black Arts Coalition, OBAC.
Okay, that sounds great. We're definitely preaching to the choir in terms of opening up access. I can see it. I can see sort of my younger colleagues, especially those that are based in London. There's my colleague Domingos, who sometimes does interviews with me here. I think he would be lapping this up, and I can see through his friends and things how they have so many networking events, that free sort of events they run throughout London for every aspect of the entertainment industry, whether it be VFX and artists coming together for even just to collab and just to get those young people who are just starting out in their careers together, together with that sort of networking experience that you talked about. I was lucky enough to be invited to several of his panels that he ran across Comic Con events here for what we call MCM Comic Con, which is our biggest Comic Con here in the UK, which brought in all of us sort of young. When I say young, we're grey in my hair, but the rest of them were quite young, and we talked about the various aspects of entertainment, especially around sort of access and whether or not we were seeing ourselves in the products that were coming out. So I think what I would probably ask next is there sort of crossover? Do you perhaps, I think you did mention it, but I'll give you a chance to mention it more, as you work with Indigenous programs, and we cover on this site the various Indigenous programs. I can remember we did one around specifically around VFX program that was running. So do you have that sort of intake with other sort of ethnic minorities and groups that would like to open up access and inspire their young people to get involved more?
No, although we are allies to other racialized and equity-seeking groups, we only service the Black community, Black communities. That's what we know, and that's what our capacity can handle. So that's who we specifically. So we do recognize that each different groups have different needs. And so we, through our own lived experience, we understand the needs of Black communities, and so that's who we serve.
Okay. So you mentioned that you're Toronto-based. Is that correct?
Pardon?
And you mentioned that you're Toronto-based.
Yes, we're Toronto-based. Yeah.
Okay. Are there is there a digital aspect of your courses, so for people who find themselves a little bit further out, that they can also sort of get involved with stuff? Because I know myself,
some of our
everything seems to be in
programs,
London for us, which is starting to change.
Which is So our programs, I mean, because we started small, since we're also a fairly new organization. Most of our programs are for Toronto-based people in the Greater Toronto area. There are some programs that are for the Southern Ontario region, which is our more of a regional area. And we are currently doing a research study that reaches across Canada. But for now, we don't really have any programs that are for the entire country. We kind of really want to be as hands-on as possible, have as much in-person programming as much as possible. And so we know with that, our capacity keeps us, quite local to Toronto, but we find that that works best for us just because of the way we want to be really immersive with our participants.
Okay. So the current state of TV and film, do you think the streaming wars are a good thing for young Black voices, bad thing, or it's much of the same and the same sort of walls and struggle forward as artists as they were?
Yeah, I mean, I think in the past few years, I feel like there has been some changes, some incremental changes more surface level. And I think that there are a lot of opportunities, a lot of things that are reactionary. So a lot of hiring sprees, a lot of training programs, a lot of things like that. But in terms of systemic change is that's the change I want to see, because I feel like I've seen this before. I've been in this industry for over 20 years, and I've seen the reactions when things happen, and when social uprisings happen, and then there's a reaction from the industry to respond and to make change. But if the gatekeepers, the decision makers, the ones who hold the power, those who own the IP, those who own, who manage the funds, those who distribute the money, those who give the green lights, if there's no diversity within those people, then where does the change happen? Because we all know when people from racialized groups or equity-seeking groups are in decision-making power and decision, even running production companies, we know that employment increases from people from those groups. So we always, we lift as we rise, right? That's how most communities work. And so if we're not in those positions of power, how is true change going to happen? And I'm seeing little incremental bits of that, but I feel like I haven't seen enough of that in the industry to feel like there's this really big, sustainable change happening. I'm holding my breath. I feel like in the past 3 years, we've seen a lot of programming and a lot of things come out from our communities and from underrepresented communities, but I want to see what happens in the next 3 years, because everything in the past 3 years has been a reaction to 2020.
And that was actually my next question. Obviously, you've started in interesting times. Obviously, COVID was a horrible time, and in many ways a tragedy, but it definitely caused people and things to approach things differently. Myself, with a colleague at an old place that I used to work with, we started a podcast just because we suddenly found ourselves sort of stuck in our homes, them in the US and me here in the UK. So I was wondering, how did COVID affect what you did, and did any sort of positive changes and adaptations come out of that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I mean, we started our emerging filmmakers program in 2018, and when the pandemic happened, we were right as the pandemic started, we were ending our second cohort, so they all graduated online, and our third cohort was entirely online. We lived through the pandemic with them. They ended up creating and writing a six-part web series, a dramatic web series, as well as a half-hour television series that they all worked on online, met in person. Most of them met in person for the first time when they went in production. And it was, I think that really bonded them as a group, as an organization, because that was in 2020 that allowed for a lot more opportunities to come about. Everything we've been screaming from 2018, we've been talking about the lack of diversity, the issues that Black people face in this industry in 2018 and prior to that in our individual ways. And in 2020, we didn't have to explain anymore. We didn't have to justify it anymore. It just kind of became easier to talk about the disparities because now the whole world was understanding that they exist. And especially in Canada, where people thought it's an American problem. Oh, things are never as bad because we're right next door to America. So of course, things can optically look worse, but are they actually? Or do we not face those same things here? And so I feel like we finally could, take a step back and not have to, explain that these things exist. We don't have to be gaslit anymore. That just that now they do. Now we can actually move on to the next conversation, which is how do we bring about that change? So it was easier to have those conversations after George Floyd kind of woke up the world, which has been, it's a shame that that tragedy had to be the thing that opened up people's eyes, but that's kind of really what did it for us. And then we just had to pivot the program. We moved everything online. And then slowly, as the world opened back up again, slowly brought things back in person, kept some things online. As I think everyone has realized that there are some benefits to keeping some things online. You could bring in people from around the world, and other things like that. And just had continued growth. I mean, we kind of really grew because it allowed us also to form the nonprofit organization and work on its strategic planning and build our new programs. A lot of that time through the pandemic and lockdown allowed us to do all that building work. So then we kind of in the past 3 years, my hands keep doing this like I'm exploding, but that's kind of what we did. We kind of really just grew and exploded in that time.
Okay. Well, that sounds great. I could definitely see some positives coming from there, and the growth of the program sounds pretty good to me. What? Oh, name. Say two things that you're looking forward to within what you do, but say in the next 6 months that we can look forward to and we can keep an eye out for.
Keep an eye out for. So for every year, part of our program, for our emerging filmmakers program, they create a project. So, and it changes. One year they did 6 short documentaries. Another year they did 2 short films. Like I said, they did a web series. Last year they did a horror film and a short documentary. And those are kind of just starting to enter the festival circuit now. So actually, as we speak, our cohort right now is in a virtual production studio space shooting their short film project. So you can look up, I think it's called Cocoa Butter, I believe. And it's a really cool short film about a genie that comes out of a cocoa butter bottle. So they're shooting. So this is the first time we're having a production on a virtual production wall, because we're always looking to the future, looking at new technologies and making sure that we're included in those spaces, because we're not always included in those spaces. So making sure that they get that exposure. So you can look out for that project in the next 6 months. And I would say another thing to look out for, also project based, is our immersive media lab. We have an immersive media lab where we put at least 10 to 15 participants through an intensive. We partner with the Canadian Film Centre's Media Lab to give people the tools to work in the XR space, so in VR, AR, and they all create a prototype. They work in groups to create prototype projects. And so those will come out probably around next March. So we're really about just giving people the hands-on experience and the ability to create work that can go into their portfolio. Also job placements. We also have a really robust placement program where we put people on various productions so they can gain experience, hopefully build some hours so we can get more people in unions. So I think just looking out for that. And we keep always trying to shout out our participants and give them spotlights and and our alumni, just so the world can get to know who these great talents we have that pass through our programs.
Okay, that sounds great. I think we're sort of wrapping things up. Do you want to mention any of your alumni and things that we might have seen them contribute to?
Yeah. Well, most recently at TIFF, the Toronto International Film Festival, two of our alumni collaborated on a short film project. Malachi Ellis from our year two emerging filmmakers program, and Ivan Osa, he was from our year three. They met from being within our community, and did a short film called oh gosh, why is the name blanking me right now? Express. That premiered at TIFF, which is pretty prestigious. It's one of the biggest festivals in the world. So we're really proud of their accomplishments. Cara Martin, who is an alumni from our year one. She's a multi-talented filmmaker. She currently has a campaign raising money for her first feature film called Scarborough Love, which we're really proud of her doing her own thing. But we also got to work with her on our own series on our production company side, Black Community Mixtapes, which is a 5-part half-hour documentary series that we just produced that Cara was the host for. So people can check her out and when they check out that series. We have a countless, I think there's a lot of accomplishments by our participants. And I think if you go to our website, oyablackarts.org, or on socials, we like to always highlight our participants and the great work that they do. And anytime they're in festivals, highlight who might be in a festival.
Okay, that's great. I will thank you for making time to come talk with us. I love what you're doing. It makes me want to see more about what similar organizations exist around here in the UK and give them same sort of shout out as we've done here. So yeah, thanks.
Yeah, thank you for having us. And I would love to connect with some UK organizations doing the same thing. We need to, create some international initiatives. That's yeah, for sure.
I agree. Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. It's been a pleasure.